Hey guys, welcome back to Morgan Hill Farms. Today I'm going to share with you everything that I am planting in my fall garden. So my goal is to keep myself out of the grocery store as much as possible and also to feed my family through the fall and even into the winter so that I can make sure that we have enough food on hand, that I'm not having to spend money that I wouldn't need to if I hadn't have planned this way. So when I do my fall garden, there is a lot of intentional things that I'm doing. So let's start out. I do have a list here. I just don't want to forget anything. So we're going to go through everything that I'm planting. We're going to start with our cabbages. Now I'm planting a few different varieties of cabbage. The first one is an early golden acres cabbage. That's an heirloom cabbage. It is about a 3-pound head. It's ready in 60 days. So a very, very quick variety. So I always plant an early golden acres. That way I can start bringing cabbage in very, very soon. A lot of your other varieties take quite a longer bit of time to mature. And so we start with the early golden acres. Then, once the early golden acres are done and we've harvested and eaten those, we start bringing in another variety that I planted called late flat Dutch. Now, they say that that particular cabbage can get up to 25 pounds. It is an heirloom. I have most often seen it between 10 to 15 pounds. It's a nice, big, flat-headed cabbage. It is delicious for sauerkrauts. That's mainly what I'm using that one for, as well as fresh eating. And so that one I'd start to harvest after the golden acres has been finished and is out of our kitchen. After that, I have one last variety of your typical cabbage, and that is a hybrid from Johnny Seeds. It is called Promise Cabbage. Now, this is a cabbage that can get up to 15 pounds as long as you're giving it adequate space to grow in your garden, and it will store for 7 to 8 months. So my hope with this one is that after the early golden acres is done, after the late flat Dutch is finished, I now will have that Promise storage cabbage to be pulling from either my fridge in the garage, or I might just be able to store that out in the garage during the fall and winter season, since it will be fairly cool out there and sometimes even cold and freezing. So I'm hoping that I can keep that stored out there, and we will have cabbage all the way through until the springtime when we will do our next planting. Now, in addition to those, I'm also planting a red acre cabbage. Again, that is sort of like the early golden acre cabbage. It is a 3-pound head, ready in about 70 days. That's really nice for just adding some color into your coleslaws. You can saute that up with caraway seeds, do a few different things with that one. Also a Savoy cabbage. That's another 2 to 3-pound head cabbage. It sort of has like curly leaves. Really like that one. It's very tender, it's very fresh. And then I'm also doing a purple Savoy. Both of those Savoy cabbages, the purple one will be ready in about 65 days, and the regular green Savoy will be ready in about 90 days. Now, if you guys have never grown your own cabbage, I highly suggest that you do. It is completely different than the store-bought cabbage that you get. Store-bought cabbage is very dense. I find the water content to be very, very low, and it's almost tough. I mean, it's nice when it's sauteed up, but when you're eating it in fresh salads and things like that, I find it fairly tough. Homegrown cabbage is just tender with a higher water content, slightly sweet, slightly nutty, it's a whole different experience. So with all of that cabbage, you may be saying, what am I going to do with all that? So the late flat Dutch, like I said, that's my main cabbage for sauerkraut. I love to ferment sauerkraut with that one. But we will also be doing cabbage rolls. We do a cabbage roll soup. We do a casserole called unstuffed cabbage rolls. That one's really good. That one's very much a comfort food, just really, really delicious with some ground pork and just really yummy. We also do egg roll in a bowl. We do stir fries, of course, coleslaw. You can fry up cabbage with bacon. You can do a New England boiled dinner. If you don't know what that is, look that one up. We always had that. I grew up in New Hampshire, so we always had that. That is a delicious meal. Of course, a sauerkraut. Now, if you want to can it and preserve it, you can can coleslaw. You can do a pickled cabbage. You could do piccalilli or chow chow. Both of those use a large amount of cabbage. Those are more like relishes. I will say that pickled cabbage is very good as a topping to hot dogs and things like that. But as far as the coleslaw, canning the coleslaw, those recipes tend to have quite a bit of sugar in them. I'm just not a fan of that. So, but people rave about it. So if that's something that you like, look those recipes up and definitely get some of that on your shelf. Also, I use cabbage for soups and stews. And then a lot of times I'll throw some in my dehydrator. And I have that on hand just to throw into soups and things if I don't have any fresh on hand during the off season. So that's what I'm going to be doing with all of my cabbage. All right, let's move on. So another type of cabbage is called Napa cabbage. It's sort of like an elongated head. This one I'm growing, it's a hybrid from Johnny Seeds. This is a 54-day variety. It'll get about 6 pounds. This one's really, really good for kimchi. If you ferment kimchi, it's super, super good for your gut to have all of that living bacteria in that food. Also, we make something called Chinese chicken salad where we take some dried noodles, crush those up. We also add in the Napa cabbage, cucumbers, peppers, maybe carrots, whatever you really have coming in from the garden, we add into that. And then we put some chicken in there and we dress it with a dressing of oil, vinegar, chicken bouillon, a little bit of sugar, some pepper, and did I say vinegar? Vinegar. Mix that up and then toss that, let it sit to kind of marinate for about 30 minutes. And that is a meal in and of itself, a nice, cool, cold salad. So that's really delicious. But also you can use the Napa cabbage in stir fries as well. The next one is bok choy. I love bok choy, especially the baby bok choy. You can fry that up with onions and carrots and eggs in the morning. You can also just fry it up as a side dish. And it freezes really well. You could just blanch it and freeze it and have that in your freezer so that that's ready to go when you need it. Okay, moving on to greens. So I will grow just a small amount of rainbow Swiss chard this year. Now, if I start growing that now, it will overwinter and then I won't have to plant it in the spring. It will go right through my summer season. So that is a great crop that just keeps on producing. It's beautiful. The red Swiss chard in that mix has a very earthy flavor, and then the golden or yellow Swiss chard is a bit nutty. So those varieties kind of mixed together make for a really delicious combination. Now you can use your Swiss chard as a base for like an Asian food bowl instead of rice if you're trying to cut out carbs. You can also saute that in some oil with some garlic and bacon. It's just another green to have on hand, and it really does add a beautiful just a beautiful aesthetic look to some of your dishes. Now, when you plant that, you'll get about 3 to 5 sprouts from each seed. It's very similar to how beets grow. So you will need to make sure to thin those out. You really just want that one plant per planting area, because these things can grow pretty big with a really large stalk, but they will produce all through the winter for you. The next one is going to be Bloomsdale spinach. So this is ready in as early as 28 days for a baby green. Now you can use spinach to completely take the place of lettuce, and spinach is going to last longer in the garden through the winter. Sometimes your lettuces, depending on the variety, can get pretty damaged if you're having some pretty consistent freezes and you don't have any frost protection over them. But the spinach, man, mine has lasted down past 20 degrees before. And during the fall season, spinach is very nutty. It's not going to bolt on you because you're having those colder temperatures. So that's something that you can keep in the garden or even in a container. We also like to use spinach in smoothies. It's a really good source of vitamin A and vitamin C. So anytime I can get any of that into my kids, it's always a good option. And you can also blanch that, and then after it's blanched, cool it off, kind of squeeze it out into a ball, and then wrap it up into some plastic wrap, and you can put that in your freezer so that you can have that ready for meals. You can, put that into dips for chips and vegetables and things like that. So definitely do some spinach. The next green is collard greens. So you can harvest these as babies. They'll be ready very, very soon for you in just weeks. But if you want them to be full grown, they're anywhere between 50 to 80 days. Now, collard greens, you can just kind of keep harvesting from. You can just take whatever leaves you need and they will just continue to grow. If you cut it at the base, it will not grow back, but if you just take the leaves, you are safe. And that one should overwinter for you. Mine did overwinter down here in South Carolina. Our lowest temps down here can be down to 10 degrees. So my collard greens, especially up here by the house in my green stalks, they overwintered for me last year. So that's a great one to keep you going throughout the entire year. They're super nutritious. You can also use those in place of tortillas if you're trying to cut carbs and you want to use that as sort of a wrap for either sandwiches or maybe like a taco or something like that. That's a good use for collards. Let's talk about kale. So I'm going to grow 2 varieties of kale this year. The first one is called dinosaur kale, or it's also known as black Tuscan, I think. So this particular type of kale produces really, really long leaves on a nice thick stalk. So this is something that you're going to be able to get a bulk amount of kale from, like if you're doing a zuppa toscana soup, if you want to add it into stews, if you want to use this as maybe a layer in your lasagna. I also dehydrate my kale and powder that up to put into smoothies, just to add some nutrition in there. And then I'm also growing something called red Russian kale or a ragged jack kale. So this one's going to be a smaller one. I'm going to do this one up here in my green stalks, whereas the Tuscan or the dinosaur kale is going to be down in my garden because that's just a much bigger plant. But the ragged jack kale, man, you can put that in salads. You start harvesting that as babies. It's just very tender. It's not like the kale you're going to get at the grocery store. It's a little bit of a different variety. So definitely try that out. Don't be afraid to put it into some cold salads. I think you'll really enjoy it. Here's a crop that you might not have thought of growing. So it's in what's called the chicory family. Okay, so I am growing escarole and endive, which are essentially the same thing. So escarole is more like a head of iceberg lettuce, let's say, where it has those really nice, broad, flat leaves. The endive is escarole again, but it has more of a curly pointed leaf. And so escarole is really, really good to use. We like to use it in pea soups and also in our lentil soups. I have also used it as a substitute for lettuce on my sandwiches, like cold cuts and things like that, and we could not tell a difference. The endive side of the chicory family is really good for some salads. Like think of a nice green base and maybe taking a soft-boiled egg and chopping that in half, putting it on top. I've also seen endive salads done with grilled peaches and grilled plums, and then a nice citrusy vinaigrette put over that. So the curly one is more towards your salads and things, whereas the escarole flat-leafed one is more for soups, stews, sandwiches, things like that. I would not use the flat-leaf escarole as my main portion in a cold salad because sometimes it can get slightly bitter. But we do like having both of those on hand. Moving on to onions. So we're going to be doing green onions, and we're also going to be doing leeks. So leeks will overwinter. They will be ready in the early spring. But if you harvest them young, that's okay. If you plant enough of them, you can still be bringing those up during the winter season. And then as far as the green onions, you can get a bunching green onion. You could plant chives. Or you could even just plant a regular bulbing onion and just go ahead and harvest the greens early so that you can have just that nice flavor on top of your tacos or chicken tortilla soup, something like that. Just something to give you that oniony flavor if you don't have any bulb onions that have stored long enough. Mine have pretty much started to go bad. They're over here in a tote, and I probably need to bring those down to the compost. So mine did not last as long as I had hoped for, but green onions are a great way to bring in that onion flavor. And then leeks, we like to saute those up, the white parts of those. We put some mustard seed in a pan with some oil and wait till those mustard seeds start to pop. And then we throw some leeks in, some carrots. We put some couscous in with that, a little bit of chicken bouillon and some water, and it just makes a really yummy, heartwarming type side for your fall and winter dishes. You can also add shrimp into that if you have shrimp. I am also growing quite a bit of broccoli this year. I think I'm doing about 100 broccoli plants, if not more. The variety that I'm growing is a Waltham 29. That is an heirloom, I believe, so you can save seeds from that if you let some of those heads go to seed after the winter time. But more likely you'll get your seeds in the springtime if you're planting a fall crop of broccoli, because that heat that comes in the spring will make those go to seed and you'll get seed quicker that way. But what we like to do with broccoli is eat it fresh. and use it with some dips and things like that. We also steam that as a side dish. You can roast that with some olive oil and garlic salt in your oven, or maybe with some other root vegetables, or with some winter squash, like butternut squash. That's really delicious. But the main way that I preserve my broccoli is just to blanch it, and then we flash freeze that, get it in a vacuum sealed bag, and we get that into the freezer, and then just pull from that as we need it. Because most of this broccoli crop is going to come in at one time because they were all started at the same time. So we're gonna preserve most of that and just pull as we need it. I am also doing some white and some purple cauliflower. Now, I'm not super successful with cauliflower. I can get, a good amount of them to head up, but they're not as big and beautiful as my broccoli. So I think I only did about 10 to 15 of those this year. So we'll eat that fresh. We will steam that, we will roast that, but we will also try to get some of that into our freezer after we blanch it and flash freeze it. You can also rice your cauliflower. You can use it as a substitute for pizza dough. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with cauliflower if that is something that you are successful at. I still struggle with that, but I'm working on it, and I might try some hybrids in the springtime to see if I can be a little more successful with cauliflower. Okay, so let's move on to our root vegetables. So I'm growing carrots. I don't really preserve carrots. You can pressure can those, and they pressure can up beautifully. I'm doing 3 4x8 beds of carrots this year. And typically what I'll do is once they're ready, I just pull them from the beds as I need them. They should last through the winter. You don't want to let them go too long, because then they will start developing these tiny roots off of that main root stock, and they tend to get a bit tough, and the core in them can be really tough. So you just got to kind of time it, and if you're thinking, they've kind of been in the ground quite a while, you can just start pulling them all out, and those will store beautifully in your refrigerator if you don't want to can those up. But your carrots will take a good amount of freezes. I do try to give them a little bit of frost protection, but if they're looking a little sad out there, don't worry, they should bounce back. We are also planting beets this year, so we are going to do some bull's blood beets. That's your classic red beet, and then some yellow touchstone gold beets. Those are really yummy. Once we harvest those, they'll be for salads, just kind of raw. We kind of grate that beet right onto our salad. You can can those. So I pressure can mine without anything, just with some water and a little bit of salt. So we pressure can that just to have as a fresh beet. But then I also pickle a sweet pickled beet. And they should keep in your produce drawer in your fridge for quite a while, at least a month. Next are turnips. I don't do a whole bunch of turnips, but we do like to have carrots and turnips as a side dish. We kind of boil up some carrots along with turnips, let those get nice and soft, and then we mash those up and have it as a side dish with some butter and salt. You can also use turnips as a substitute for mashed potatoes. Of course, it is a little bit of a different flavor profile, but something to keep in mind if you don't have any potatoes left from your harvest in the summertime. I am also planting some radishes. Radishes are awesome because they can be ready in as early as 21 days. I'm doing an Easter egg blend, so they'll be all different colors and they're really beautiful. Mainly we slice those, put them on salads. You can slice those and put them on tacos, but you can also roast radishes. A lot of your vegetables, when you roast them, will take on a totally different flavor. So definitely try a few new recipes this winter when the season is a little bit slower for you. I'm trying to definitely increase my repertoire of things that I'm cooking and things that I'm making. And so that's a really good time of year to kind of practice and see what you can do with the different items. And then lastly, of course, we will do our lettuces. So I will grow those varieties that are better in the cold. I do a cool guard lettuce. I'm also doing a mesclun mix that has arugula and red lettuce, green leaf lettuce. As long as I give that a little bit of frost protection, that should do just fine as well. And then up in my green stalks here, I am going to be planting some butter crunch lettuces. Now I will keep those going. I will succession sow those every time I plant out my green stalks with my baby soil blocks. I will start a new set of lettuce just because our sunlight time is getting less and less, and it's going to take longer for these crops to produce. So I want to make sure that I have lettuce on hand through the winter. If it gets really cold one night, I will make sure to bring those green stalks into my garage. In fact, once we get into the deep winter, I will be bringing those in every night. And sometimes I'll even leave them in there during the day if it's just going to be really frigid. But having the green stalks and having them rollable, it really allows you to have a lot more food than you would if you were just in the garden with no protection. And then inside, I'm also going to be doing quite a bit of microgreens this year. Those are nice for toppings on top of burgers. You can put them into smoothies. You can make an entire salad just out of microgreens, or you can just top your salad with microgreens. They are so tender and delicious, and they're super, super nutrient dense. So to have that through the winter months, I think is going to be a great benefit. So if you haven't tried microgreens, definitely try those out. They're just a really great addition to kind of keep you out of the grocery store in the winter months, especially if you're looking for lettuces and things for salads and garnishes. So that is it. I think I've covered everything that I'm doing in the garden this year. Typically, I plant about 300 brassicas, which are your cabbages, broccolis, cauliflower, collards, kale, all that stuff. This year, I actually went ahead and doubled that. I don't really know why. I just kind of felt the urge to get a little bit more down in the garden since we have the space. So we are trying to bring in as much food as possible this year. And hey, if we don't need it, we can just bless our neighbors and friends with that. So there's no harm in planting a little bit extra. If you guys have any questions about any of the varieties that I recommended, or just any questions about the fall or winter garden, please leave those in the comments below. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share. And yeah, I hope you guys stay out of the grocery store this winter. We know that prices are just going to keep increasing, so definitely save your budget and get a fall and winter garden in now.